And I am recording, I believe.
Yep, it shows up for me too.
Cool. Hello and welcome to Altacast number 18.
Wow, that was real something.
Yep. So today we're going to talk about uh, difficulty.
How to do the world's worst Australian accent coming from an Australian.
Oh, I think it's pretty good, eh?
It's horrendous. I'm looking for my food.
I'm looking for my food. Yes. So today we're talking about difficulty in a Township Tale. Some of the new revelations that we've come across as we've made this game, and kind of how we're going to apply some of our uh, future concepts of varied build requirements between people. So more into that later after we're done with the catch up of what everyone's doing. So myself and Joel are working on the next update, which is coming out next week.
What's that for? Jokes. I know he's not going to spoil it.
Now I'm not going to. Should be pretty good. Something I guess you can say is that in the last Altacast, I talked a bit about the texture stuff that we were experimenting with. That's very likely to come out next update. So you have a bit of that to look forward to. Timo was working on landmark stuff not too long ago. He still has a bit more work left on it, I think. I'll need to catch up with him. And that might be some. So for people who don't know, landmarks is the idea that key visual points in the distance will continue to render and continue to exist on your client. And that means that when you look at town from like a far distance, you'll still see buildings and things like that. And we found a fairly efficient way to render those.
Yeah, a really noticeable one is stuff like the town hall. So when Boramy was testing, the town hall from the sandstone bridge should be visible, but has unloaded. But now in the future, it will be visible, and it really gives more character to the town. I think when you look at it from a distance and you're seeing
all of his
a
features.
town rather than an empty field that you know in your head is a town, but because it's a video game, you've sort of accepted that it's just an empty field right now. So
Serena and Victor are still doing the same old optimization stuff. Nothing really new to say there. Like obviously the landmark thing is one of the things that they kind of worked on a little bit, experimented with, and that Timo helped us bring over to the main game instead of their R&D branch.
I did say in the last Altacast that it was Victor that worked on it, but apparently Timo did a hefty amount of work for it. So credit to Timo. My apologies, Timo.
So Sebastian and Charna are doing cosmetic stuff. They continue to work on that other thing that I hinted at last Altacast with the thing that supporters are probably gonna like. And Saul, sorry, he's about to move on to some new stuff, just because there's some new grounds, I guess, that he's going to be discovering soon. I'm running the spec doc on it after we're done with this Altacast. So he's got a new thing to reach, which will be quite interesting. I think may tie in a little bit with some of the stuff we talk about today.
Yep.
Then there is we have a new intern, Ivy. I think we talked about that last time as well. She's continuing working cosmetic stuff. So now that Sebastian, Tiana, and Ivy are on the cosmetics team, Sebastian and Tiana can work a bit more on some branch out into some new things, which is kind of the new thing they're working on with and for supporters. And Ivy's kind of starting the process where they were about 4 or 5 months ago or something like that by now. So yeah, the team's growing. It's exciting. And Tima is doing same old of business stuff, and
Yeah.
financial year taxes stuff was just wrapped up. So who knows what he's doing now? Yep, that about covers it, right? That's everyone.
Yep, that's everyone. Yeah.
All right.
So today's topic,
Yes.
Boramy described it badly. I think the correct title for this video is non-linear difficulty.
Yes.
See?
All
You know
right.
exactly what I'm talking about now.
Elaborate a
We
bit
may
more.
as well end of Altacast.
Well,
Everyone knows what
I mean, the thing is, it's going to be the difficulty of the game. No.
So a lot of people, I think, will come to this video in one of two places. One is they're probably either newish to the game, and by newish I mean anywhere from 0 to 3 months or something, and they might find that things are difficult, they die to creatures and they whatever. And then there's probably people who would consider themselves veterans of the game, who think the game is ridiculously easy because they've got the best gear that they can get and they can one hit pretty much anything. That might be different since the forest update, because I know some of these enemies are a bit more tanky and a bit more aggressive. Like,
Yeah, there's a lot of chaos going on, I think, in the forest.
I don't recommend anyone tries to take on a babu by themselves. But there's still this kind of aspect of the difficulty is kind of how much health do you have, how much damage can you deal, how much health do they have, and how much damage do they deal. And the difficulty is very much focused around PvE, like killing, fighting as well.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the things that we'll be talking about today, I guess, branch into more passive dangers, but also more specialized or different types of active dangers rather than just straight up taking damage, I guess.
Yeah. So part of the reason behind this discussion is, and we talked about this a long time ago, was how caves have this darkness that you need to have a torch to deal with this darkness. When we were working on the forest, we knew that we weren't going to have something quite as harsh as that, because you can still, kind of run through the forest and avoid things. And the way we've built it so far is that you can run through it, but then all you do is you end up at the end of the forest, and you didn't grab any of the precious stuff that's there along the way. And if you wanted to slow down and you want to gather the right woods, or you want to uncover some of the loot, you have to kind of deal with the enemies that are around you. That's why there's a lot of diggable things, wood cutting trees, and then there's things that the enemies themselves dropped. So because of all that, it was interesting to see that it is a valuable thing, but we also want those kind of pretty hard cutoff things like the darkness in the caves to be a part of the game, and without it always being darkness.
Do we want to give some examples to start off with?
Yep. So an example is an area of the game that it's too hot for you to travel through. Like imagine it's like this magma pits or like this volcanic area, and from a temperature perspective, you can't arrive there unless you've got something to counteract that. Could be somewhere that's way too cold, and therefore you'll freeze to death.
Cold is a bit more manageable, I imagine, because like if you make campfires and stuff, you can survive. I'm not sure how people make themselves colder in real life. It's not a concept.
You get a fan.
You get a what? A fan. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
You've got to fan yourself as you walk around. Or you get an umbrella to block yourself from the sun.
You have a circle of fanning. So you fan someone, they fan someone else, they fan you.
Or you have a backpack that's just an ice cube.
Or you are in an ice cube and someone else pushes you, and then they die of heat. But then you have someone else run in and start pushing you slowly.
You swap places, you hot swap it. Okay, but now for real, this is something that's probably going to tie into alchemy, because it seems to be the right type of effect. It may tie maybe a little bit into food, because things like if you have a lemon-based food or something like that, I feel like that's good for the cold. Or if you have spicy food, sorry, good for the heat, and then spicy food for the cold.
Sure.
Yeah.
If you have a gin and tonic, you can survive any level of heat.
Yeah. So
yeah.
And so what this means is that eventually the overworld would be filled with all these different areas that that you can't get through unless you've got the right gear for it. And so rather than the difficulty always being like you take more and more damage, depending on where you're going, it's more that you're taking different types of damage.
Yeah.
And to get the resources that you need to travel through through land A, maybe you have to go through like land B and C to harvest something there. And so this is kind of like chain of places you have to go to.
Forgot to mention land E.
Land E, what's up with land
And
E?
F. Oh, F is the most dangerous one. F is both hot and cold. You gotta start a fire and fan yourself at the same time so that you can be both cold and hot to counteract the hot and cold. But these sorts of things won't just tie into the environments. Obviously, they'll also tie into the creatures, stuff like that. If we had a fire creature, it could literally create heat areas where you're going to burn if you stay in them too long. But maybe if you've got a fan, or maybe ice. I feel like ice enemy is easier to work with. If there's an ice enemy that creates cold zones, then maybe you can make sure that you've got a torch or something that can help create heat to keep you warm as you're fighting this creature. And it's not about you fighting it. It's not about the damage and health sort of equation anymore. It's literally about you just surviving the environment that it's creating for you. And we've already got stuff like crippling, but I imagine we'll have more sorts of concepts of like stamina statuses over time as well that will kind of mix things up a fair bit.
I think
we've got one planned, which I'm not going to spoil at all, but probably not coming super soon. But what we think about when we're coming up with these ideas is kind of ways that we can encourage collaboration between players as well. Because fighting right now can still feel kind of like everyone just doing their own thing. So ways for us to make it so that you work as a team more, or when someone screws up, maybe there's a way someone else can actually help them. So stuff like healing is something that's not in the game right now. Those sorts of things will kind of add different aspects to difficulty, because again, it's not just about dealing more damage. The way that you might get better in combat might be going into different avenues, like learning to heal or learning to control the environment more as well.
Yeah, I can imagine a lot of magic stuff tying into it. And I think, there'll be things that are fairly like physical environment-wise, with like hot, cold.
Yes and no, in and out.
We're also gonna kind of make our own hazards in like a fantasy style way. So it won't just be things that you can kind of easily equate in your mind. There'll be things where we can set the rules, and that'll let us really kind of explode and explore what we can do with this idea of having these difficult hazards.
Yeah. In general, we've already talked about physical sort of environmental things, like I think we have at least the idea of like rocks that you stand on and they fall down, or I mean, we've got various ideas. Stuff like most of the ones we've thought about are kind of rockish or cliff-based because we're trying to think of the realms that the game's kind of already got. So stuff like falling boulders that you have to dodge or platforms that fall, as I mentioned. Those sorts of things will still add diversity to the experience, the combat experience. With some of the trial things that Sol was working on, I know there was some unique environmental hazards in there that aren't in the game currently, which the way he addressed them was actually looking at, when fighting these particular creatures, what tends to be the common strategy. And so what's a cool environmental hazard that actually completely counters that usual strategy? So now in this environment, you actually have to completely rethink the way you fight this type of enemy. So I think that's really cool. And I think there'll be more of that over time as well, not just in predefined experiences, but throughout the game in general.
I think we can we can also think of these hazards that are impacting the tools that you might be using. We talked about the idea of like in the caves, for example, having an area where there's this kind of suffocating gas, I suppose, in the air, and so like anything that's like flammable extinguishes out. And so if you want to travel through there, you have to use a light source that isn't flame-based. And that sort of thing can really create, I guess, a bit of like a niche thing where you can't go on. Yeah. Like you just hear a gust and everything goes away, like all your lights go.
Things like, another environmental thing is stuff like wind zones in general. I'm not sure if we'll ever pull off wind to the extent that I would like to pull off wind, just because, physics is expensive. But still having aspects where, even if it's not a fog that blows out your torch, like being if it gets too cold, maybe your torch might go out. So a normal torch isn't good enough, or you're up in the mountains and there are these random gusts of wind that will just blow out any torch that's on. So the torch might still be the best light source, but maybe you need to try and have some secondary ones for when that wind comes through. And of course, day and night will always play a part in these sorts of things, because these environments will naturally be kind of brighter in the day and darker at night, if we're talking about overworld, obviously.
I mean, there's an interesting duality there, because with every environment we come up with, we can create a variation of it that happens when it is night and happens when it is day. So that, maybe this place is not so bad when you're walking through the day, but then when night comes, it's really bad. So you want to get through this zone before, night falls, or so on and so forth. Like maybe we even have in between periods between the two where, like, as the sun sets, things get a bit nasty.
Yeah. Day and night in general is something that will play more of a part in the future. I mean, anyone who's played Minecraft or Don't Starve or Terraria, I don't know as much about, but classic RPG survival-esque games, they all make use of nighttime. And right now we haven't done a lot to make use of nighttime. The Strigal's sleep, so it's a little bit more peaceful around town.
We are
the Phantoms, the Phantoms do come out at night, but we have lots of plans to tie in not just creatures, but also various mechanics that might, like things that might only be able to be done at nighttime. Imagine if we put in magic rituals, it would make a lot of sense that some rituals might only be able to be performed at nighttime, for instance. Ways that we can really create, I guess, more meaning to the daytime, nighttime, rather than just lights on, lights off. So I'm not sure if that necessarily relates to today's topic of difficulty, but I guess to some extent it does, because it is that diversity to difficulty where even if you're planning to just go into the forest, you're still going to, in the same spot, same physical spot, you might have two different types of difficulty that you're going to have to kind of plan for and take into account. So
Yeah. And it all kind of plays back into the idea of loadouts to some degree, and you being equipped for the scenario and the adventure that you're trying to go on. How are we doing for time, by the way? Do you know what? How long ago we recorded?
no. I sent you a.
You sent me a
You
message.
sent me a message saying let me in at 12:05.
Okay, so we got like 10 minutes.
So we've been like 20 minutes so far.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, just checking so that we're not going for too long. So, and I think, with the fact that we have a day-night system, I think we'll be sure that when we start with these new kind of hard cutoff challenge areas where you have to have something, conceptually, I like to think that we'll keep in mind that we want to have that day-night diversity because day-night's already a thing.
Yeah. I think, something that is going to be interesting from our perspective as we develop these things is keeping into account, like keeping, I forgot what the keeping in, whatever, is taking into account, that's the way, taking into account whether we want to make it like a party-wide thing or like a party has this sort of thing, which are two different choices. So in the case of a cold environment, everyone in the party will need to have a way to keep warm, whether that be, each having a torch or having some sort of enchantment on them or something. But there might also be various challenges or things in the future where, as long as someone in your party can kind of do this thing, like maybe we can go through the cold as long as one person in the party happens to be the pyro magician sort of class, and they can just summon up like a tornado of fire around us, and we can just be like, yep, let's just walk through this snowy region without much effort. And I think that's going to be really good moments for a group of friends when they go from this really difficult moment to suddenly unlocking this ability or having this kind of revelation as to how they can do something so much better or so much more efficiently.
Yeah, I love the idea of players kind of being forced into this semi-escortish mission, right? Where, like, I've got this kind of spherical beacon around me that is protected from this element. So everyone crowds together, and then that's a great time for us to throw some enemies and stuff at them while they're trying to travel.
Yeah, when you think you're safe. The other thing is, if we put in, say we put in like a, some sort of, I don't know, say we put in like a swimming mechanic where you have to learn to swim or hold your breath for longer or something, then there could be something where not everyone needs to swim through this channel, but as long as one person can swim through, then maybe they can open a gate for other people to come through, those sort of environmental things. Or maybe you're fighting some sort of boss where there's a lot of water involved, and so you can kill it without the need to swim or swim for extended periods of time or whatever. But if you can, it gives you this edge up on this boss, because now you can swim up close and get some melee attacks in rather than having to do everything from range. Stuff like that will, it's not strictly required, but it's just these sorts of things that will help you make different choices and have advantages in situations. But on the flip side, maybe if you're swimming, you can't carry a lot, otherwise you'll sink down. So the person who is swimming in to try and get this advantage now has to take that into account when sort of setting up their loadout.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, a big part of it is just thinking, like trying to find ways to make people think about their loadout rather than having some default whatever loadout.
And then a lot of that will lead to you, players having, and I mean you guys as the players having a more just a more interesting, more colorful adventure playing the game. Where if you were to describe your experience with if you were to describe your experience in the game to someone who wasn't in there, you could say like, "Oh, we were trekking up this mountain, but then this like snowstorm hit, so we had to pull out this item." But thankfully, like one of our party members had this spell that could cast this heat area around for us. But the heat attracted a bunch of like these buzzards that came after us, so we had to fend them off. We went out of supplies, and then we got split up in the forest, and we had to. It just explodes into this.
And we were starving, so we killed Boramy, and we ate his flesh. But then we all turned into cannibal mutants, and
And then you're playing like the Revenant in the Township Tale, pretty much.
But these sorts of emergent experiences where it's not emergent in the sense of like mechanic, but it's like the story naturally flows in a way that's actually not entirely within your control. Right now you go, we're going to go woodcutting. We're going to use this. Oh, there's some Goterras. We killed them. We're going to use this wood to make weapons or whatever. But in Boramy's example, the fact that each decision the player makes is kind of met by a response from the game world is so much more engaging and experienced than like it's no longer a choose your own adventure. It's a choose your own adventure at the mercy of the game sort of experience, which is I think generally going to be much more exciting.
And I think if you were to if the question ever comes as to like if you ever had to list out the things you could do in the Township Tale, we want it to sound like you're an insane person talking to your friend.
Yeah. I think something else is if you want to list all the things you can do in Township Tale, I kind of like the idea that that list is not something someone can go, oh, I want to do this. Like, I want to get caught up in a blizzard. It's not necessarily something they can just go, oh, go to this mountain, there's a 24/7 blizzard. It might be that occasionally there's a blizzard, and it provides a unique experience for the party that was there at that time, rather than just being a staple sort of thing that everyone's experienced a blizzard. Like to me, the fact that these sorts of things can be quite rare and feel quite personal is pretty exciting. So
yeah. And I think all of that plays a role into how we're continuing our expansion of the overworld. Because that's there's all that land that we got to cover, and we want to cover it with something that is going to be meaningful and can help us create more fun content for the game and really make it Township Tale the adventure game that we've said we were going to make, and we've been doing so far.
It's worth noting right now our current focus isn't on new regions of the world. Like, we're not working on a mountain snowy scheme or a desert at this stage. We are focusing more on mechanics with what Soul's going to be working on. It's a bit more of it more ties into the existing game across the board, rather than it being a new like entirely new region of the world or anything like that. And as you guys know, the next thing that I'll be working on, I assume people know, maybe not, the next thing I'll be working on is house building. So obviously with all of Township Tale, and this is a constant I guess both exciting and painful aspect, is there's so many of these different avenues that we plan to go down with professions, with the combat experience, with the sort of building up your town and your character, and so we've got lots of different arcs, I guess, that we're working on. So right now,
nothing will help us work on this combat stuff though, because it finally solves some of the loadout problems that people have had with the story. So I think
somewhere in my bag.
So now when we have housing, you'll be able to store your stuff, go on these adventures, and not feel like you've just gotta only take everything that's on your back.
We honestly do see housing as a solution to many problems. So and it opens up so many doors for us. Like there's finally like the idea of finding a trinket that's totally useless in the world is something I actually really love in video games. But it depends on you having somewhere to put them. And in a game that's as tight inventory wise as Township Tale, there's no way anyone's going to want to keep these trinkets really. Where stuff like housing opens up stuff like that. And to me, that alone is super exciting. But just, yeah, having storage, having a long-term goal to work towards, those sorts of things. But yeah, so our general focus is, to sum up that, I guess, is Solars is working on things that kind of change up the existing experience in various ways. Boramy and I have been working on Next Update. I won't go into detail about that too much, but it kind of changes up the existing experience a bit as well. And then the next focus is for me, and I think Boramy is going to be all over the place helping different people. But for me, it's going to be house building. So working on opening new doors for everything, basically. New doors for professions, new doors for storage and kitting and stuff like that. So,
Yeah. All right. So that pretty much covers, I think, what we're going to talk about for the Altacast so far.
Yep.
Yep. Now we're going to move on to the Q&A. Might take a quick break, just so we can reset the Zoom thing, probably, right?
Sounds good. Yeah.
We've got to wipe the stuff that is spilled on the floor.
Nice.
All right, we'll be right back. All right, recording. Hello, folks. Welcome back for the second half of this Altacast number 18. And today we are going through the questions for Q&A. And I'm going to let Joel ask the questions because I only have one monitor here and I don't want to screw up the recording somehow.
We've got a funny story about the Q&A this week.
Oh, yeah, I fucked up.
So we don't have a whole bunch of questions. It's not overly surprising because Boramy put the wrong link in the last video. For future reference, we've stopped changing the URL. So if people went back 2 videos ago, they would have had it. But I can confirm that all these questions, the oldest question, no one's asked a question since the last Altacast. I can see the dates on them. But that means we can go through and answer some questions that didn't make it.
If there aren't enough, we can ask each other questions and we'll answer them.
That's great. That's a great idea. Okay. Or we can ask questions that we've heard community members ask.
Or you straight up ask in Discord otherwise. And then we'll answer them.
That's a great idea. Let me quickly do that. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to supporter chat, supporter spoilers. I'm going to say, ping me with questions, doing Altacast now. Quick. Okay, and we're going to keep an eye on that. But for now, first question here. Oh, hello, are you visiting us? First question here is, are you planning to reintegrate non-consensual PvP back to the public servers? No, that's quite unlikely to happen. In fact, the PvP server, there's been times where we've been tempted to shut it down. Dealing with being official and dealing with PvP is really difficult because it is a very generally grey area between harassment and valid PvP, stuff like that. And on a private server, it's up to the server owner to make a verdict, and at the end of the day, it's their server. They can do what they want, and it doesn't have any larger implications because it's kind of a closed ecosystem. But because Township Tale servers, if Outer makes a bad verdict, like if the official moderators make a verdict that you don't like, it will affect your experience with the rest of a Township Tale. So it's much more difficult to moderate and deal with. And
I mean, and as a game where we primarily are focused on building the PvE aspect, we don't want to have to overly deal with PvP problems.
Yeah, I think we might be able to kind of reconsider our stance once houses are out and we can see what player storage looks like at that stage. But the reality is right now, the fact that a player can start playing Township Tale, really be enjoying themselves, and then get killed and lose all their stuff, it's probably one of the biggest things that puts off early game players. And the reality is the no PvP rules don't perfectly protect against that, but they have reduced that significantly.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, yeah, the other thing is it always becomes a big shouting match in servers. It's never very graceful of an encounter.
yeah.
So
yeah, yeah. Anyway, next question. I'm not sure if we answered this one. Outercon when? Did you answer that last week?
maybe very quickly, but I don't know. Like Altacon is like a random idea that was thrown around for a very long time, but the issue is we know everyone's all around the world, so picking a single location to do it is not very. It's not easy.
We obviously like there's a number of players of the game, but there's a significantly smaller number of people who would be willing to
try to buy a
spend money to go to a conference, and even smaller amount of money, people who are willing to spend the money to fly to another city and spend money to go to a conference. So
the most likely thing that might happen is if we're ever going to a conference like Gamescom or something, or like PAX or E3 or something like that, then we might be able to meet some of you there.
Like book out a bar or something.
Yeah.
Or
I mean, we could even have we could probably manage to get a panel at a conference if we get enough people.
Yeah.
We would organize it as part of underneath this other umbrella, because hosting our own
is a bit tough.
Yeah.
And even if it's like side loading off something like PAX, then theoretically, if it's just at a bar or something, then maybe it could end up being free to go to, and you don't even need PAX tickets to go there. And that might potentially make it easier for people to.
You will need to be over drinking age though for doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I
don't want to get
bars are the best place to meet up, but yeah, there is different. Regardless, baby steps. Let's take them as we go. Okay, I like this next question. Will there be a way to repair an item before it breaks? Oh wait, this is not the question I thought it was, but yeah.
Yes, there will be.
Yeah. Okay, I have a better question. Not better. Sorry to ask for this question. I have a related question, maybe is how I should have phrased it. Will we be able to repair items after they break, Boramy?
After they break?
After they break.
Like when it's nothing?
Yeah.
Probably not.
But like hideous weapons are broken, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm getting shut down here.
No, probably not. I mean, I've thought about this a little bit, but
it could be that something like a pickaxe head might fall off the shaft or become completely unusable, potentially, is one way we could do it. So they are broken, but it's still only one piece.
I mean, because to me, I just consider the last stage of, you probably won't be able to like.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. The last stage of durability is basically a stop using me, I'm about to break sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Or
And
I mean,
that's your last gen.
like, or keep using me until I break. Like, it's you kind of make that
It's your
decision.
choice.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess the difference is that it doesn't break into something you can repair afterwards compared to how the Hebios weapons are. For now, that's going to stay the case, just because it's very taxing on asset production to make all those broken parts. Uh, and if they're not overly useful, particularly for the default weapons, then we're not going to have them.
This question's a long question, not going to read it out. But basically, are we making changes to digging loot or digging in general?
Yes, but digging's probably going to provide resources that are not necessarily found in other methods. So
Yeah.
it used to be that you could get ingots pretty easily. We don't want to shortcut other mechanics with this system. Um, Already, there's some balances that we have to make a lot to the metal weapons that spawn in the caves. But yeah, generally we don't want to um, overly shortcut like other processes. Like
I
digging
think that
isn't necessarily an alternative to mining.
I think there might be a bug with the spawn rates of dug things, which we'll address when we get the chance. But I think digging on top of the unique loot that Boramy mentioned will also hopefully tie into stuff like treasure hunting in the future. Like there'll be more mechanics kind of focused around digging and making digging kind of exciting. Even stuff like farming in the future. Like right now, I don't think there's a way to uproot a seed, but theoretically we could tie something like that into digging as well. Like there's lots of opportunities for digging to kind of expand its domain. Will the sound effects for torches ever be changed? To me, it sounds more like a fireplace with the crackling of wood and stuff. Before Boramy answers this question, I have a question for the person who's asked this question. Have you ever held a torch in real life? I'm curious because I haven't. I haven't held like a fire torch. So I have no idea what they sound like. And as far as I'm aware, they sound exactly like a fireplace. So I'm just curious. But Boramy, what's the answer?
Well, the answer to your question with usually there's like a resin that's on like a stick, and that's what a torch actually is. So you hear that cracking, but it's a different type of cracking than wood cracks.
Okay.
The stick on your torch doesn't normally crack that much. And the answer to that is when we have a sound system like WIs is when the sound for that will change, so that it behaves more differently when you swing it around. All of the sounds in the game right now are fairly placeholder, because they're just there to tell you what's happening more so than to necessarily sound super nice.
Okay, I've just noticed supporter chat's been doing their thing. What are our thoughts on vehicles like dice carts?
Yes,
Dice? How do you say it? Please tell me.
I say dice. Yeah,
Dice. Okay. Thoughts on vehicles like dice carts? I'm not sure about dice, but carts with
carts and like animal-driven carts. We've always been fans of. It's just a matter of good control schemes and stuff like that for all those things, and how
Okay.
to play around with the procedural terrain and stuff like that.
What's my favorite color? Probably brown, maybe. I like brown. Rough time frame for housing? No. Will server owners eventually get in-game tools to do prefabulator-like things?
Twitch.
Not in the short. Sorry, that's Twitch. Yeah, not in the short term. Maybe. Like I personally quite like the idea that maybe in the long run, Township Tale does have some sort of experience editor, like world building ish thing, so that you can kind of. Oh, you're so beautiful. do some of that stuff. But at this stage, our focus is thoroughly on fleshing out the vanilla experience
Yeah,
rather than
usually the meta
modern.
tools like for dashboard and stuff like for commands are a bit of like a I guess a hobby of Joel and Timo and all that stuff to work on because the main game progress is the main thing that takes precedence over everything.
Will there be complex furniture? I don't know what you mean by complex, but I hope to try out things like chairs that you can actually sit on, and it kind of snaps you to them, and you can adjust your height maybe so that it makes sitting on. Oh, you're so lovely. Makes sitting at a table nicer. But in terms of like, yeah, furniture is going to be interesting because obviously part of it's decoration, but part of it's also functionality, and it will be nice to see what sort of functionality comes with furniture over time. Will there ever be forest customization? I guess same as the previous kind of question. We want to focus on the vanilla experience, but I do think it would be awesome to have settings to make it so that you could weight the biomes customly, maybe, but again, likely not soon. The other thing to take into account with all these questions is, from our perspective, bug fixing and taking in bug reports has been significantly harder since people could spawn things on their server, because suddenly an issue happens and we're not sure, like a server is chugging ridiculously, and it's hard for us to diagnose, is that because of something they've done, or is that because something in the game itself is broken?
Yeah.
Hey, Boramy, when can I tame a Shmichi to follow me around?
When we have taming, I suppose. Like I've thought about things like that, and I think the only slight issue we have right now is that concepts of like a target that a AI might have are not necessarily saved or serialized in any way.
Yeah.
So this Michi would never remember that you were its fan or that it was a fan of you.
Will pets be a part of housing? No. Launcher 2.0 when? Go away, boy. Will server owners be able to adjust the drop time of fruit? Again, settings. Maybe, but I think drop times of fruit might be something that we tweak ourselves over time as well to try and find what's right. And again, with any of these balance things, if we let everyone customize it, it might make it easier for us to find a good value, but it might also make it harder for us to find a good value. CJ's got a lot of forest questions. Minimum spawn rates for chests in the forest, stuff like that. It's all settings. It's the same answer to all of them.
Yeah, like the messing with server stuff and like is the current trend of everything right now. But yeah, we're not going to be focusing on any of that stuff anytime.
It's definitely, yeah, it's a big discussion in supporter chat constantly.
It's like how to manipulate the game.
Maybe I'll skip. Sorry, I'm gonna to whoever asks questions. I'm gonna skip anything too servery related. But would it be possible to attach our camera to the wooden backpack arm?
Your screenshot camera?
Yeah.
Perhaps. Like we have, like ever since Live came out, and I've been seeing like people in mixed reality playing Township Tale. I kind of want that like a third-person camera, but just for your like that still plays your avatar, and for the screenshot camera to have that function. If I can think of a good reason why you would want it on your arm, on like your lighting arm rather than that, then maybe. Like interaction with the camera and items is always kind of fun.
Yeah. Joel, what did you just finish eating in the stream? I just finished eating Carmen's protein, salted dark chocolate and almond, 10 grams per bar. Not sponsored, but would happily take sponsorship. Thank you, Carmen's, for your fantastic muesli bars. Okay. painting walls in house building.
It would really put a stress on our like optimization technologies, I think. Um,
It would
so
be dope.
it would be dope.
Depends on what you mean by painting. Because if it's like if it ends up just being a flat color, it's much more achievable than being able to draw smiley faces on the wall and have that permanently be there. But
Yeah,
yeah,
but yeah, it's I mean, still like, what is it like? Making sure that if you are painting a flat wall of one color, what if you're only halfway done? What does that look like? Um, that sort of thing. Like, or does it not matter at that point where you're stroking on the wall? It seems like as a VR mechanic, it would need to be very responsive, and that's maybe something that we can afford.
what is the answer to life? I believe that's been confirmed to be 42. And other than that, I'm gonna I'm gonna cut off the supporter questions there because they're going crazy and they're all about server ownership and settings and stuff. Maybe I'll pick one or two more questions from the Q&A site.
Yeah.
Oh, you're back again. Will we be making coins harder to get?
I think I kind of mentioned that one last cast maybe.
Um,
But pretty much like housing is going to put a fair amount of cost to coins. Like coins are going to become a bit more of a sought after commodity, and so we kind of want to see what it's going to look like when when like gold is so sought after because of housing. I'm kind of curious to see what the economy is going to be like for that point.
yeah, yeah. Coins are 100% gonna be easy to evaluate once once houses are out. What we can't, just for future reference, I don't think we can answer too much questions about semantics with stuff like magic, because this question here, we'll try and answer it, but like these sorts of things are pretty tough. What will the main difference between spellcasting and elemental magic be?
Well, it's kind of like they don't sound completely exclusive in my like just at first glance.
Yeah,
But something unique about elemental magic is, I suppose, it's going to be its the physical properties that the spells exhibit in relation to fire, ice, wind, electricity, water, that sort of thing.
yeah,
Uh, spell casting may instead be a bit more like energy based, I suppose, and less class like divided amongst these different um, types.
yeah.
Like spell casting to me just sounds like throwing a spell, and elemental sounds like the kind of spell you're throwing. So
Yeah,
yeah, but yeah, like Joel said, that we can't really go too much into magic because
it just hasn't been designed in to the fullest extent. Like we've had lots of discussions about this, and so there's probably like a trillion different versions penciled into our brains, but nothing's been like.
yeah, I mean, like when it comes to a question like that, like it's down to like the execution mechanics, um, and that's what's going to be the
So elemental magic is going to start with you closing your fist for like 2 seconds, and then it's going to burst into flame. But that's going to be a skill you unlock, and that's going to be like the entry point to fire magic.
I mean,
But
what's the skill
until you
called?
unlock that
What's it
skill,
called?
you're going to have to put your hand into like the forge or something to light your hand on fire to use their skill. It's called fire hands.
No, no, I'm scrapping it right now. Never happening.
It's been locked in for months and months. We actually did an Altacast on magic at some
Yeah,
stage. So
yes, you should check that out
if you haven't, you should check that out.
I think it's like Altacast 3 or something. It's the one where we're in San Francisco.
Yeah. And I guess um, Let's finish up on this. The most important question: who can do the most push-ups on the outer team? I put my chips on Timo.
Is that who you're putting your chips on?
That's the question.
Okay. Well, who do you think can do the most push-ups?
I'm pretty sure you can do more than Timo.
Yeah, I can. That's right, I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm probably the more push-up heavy person on the team.
In terms of push downs, however.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, no, that's it. I'm not sure. Do you have a question you want to answer?
From what?
Well, we said at the start we could just ask each other questions,
Yeah.
but otherwise we're done, I guess.
We're almost done. Yeah, when's housing coming out, Joel?
We totally skipped that question.
Yeah, but they said a rough time estimate for housing. I want to know exact estimate.
Well, maybe I'll spoil this and say that a while back, Timo did a little bit of work on house building. Well, a while back, I did a little bit of work, and then it was given to Timo for a little while. But the reality is, different priorities have popped up over time, and in the end, he had to focus on helping us with the forest and doing stuff like the landmark system, and
a whole heap of
this
server stuff as well, like
and a heap of server stuff. Yeah. So it's by no means close to done, but we've done a little bit to do with kind of the framing of the house. A little bit of that is done, but the reality is I'm not 100% sure where it's at. And after this next update is out, I'll actually get a better chance to thoroughly look at it.
Yeah.
And then same with the forest. There's a big difference between having the tech done and having the feature done. So with the forest, a lot of the tech, majority of the tech was done quite early this year, but then we spent a few months tweaking the tech to better suit our needs, optimizing it, and actually adding in the gameplay and the new enemies and that sort of thing. And so likewise, we might have the tech for house building done, but to have
the
mechanics,
yeah,
the experience, I imagine we'll want to have some level of furniture potentially, or at least the ability, there's no point to a house if I can't even place a bookshelf in there, for instance, so that I actually have storage. And then we still need to work on technology or decisions about, who can access chests in your house and how do I pay rent and all those sorts of gameplay experiences that layer on. So I really don't have an
topics and questions and new things that we'll cover in an official housing Altacast before we go too deep into it. And it is going to take a while for Joel to do it, so stay patient. I'm going to be working on a lot of content-y things. Trying to try and get Eric's trials out after this next update. And so you'll see a bit more of the me at least continuing a bit on the adventure side of things. All right, let's finish up. Thanks a lot for watching the Altacast, everyone. Be sure to go in the Q&A below with the right link to ask some future questions. And
our guest star, Splash.
Yeah. Splash. Usually Puddles that appears on the Altacast.
This is Splashes. She's so lovely. She's so lovely. Anyway, say goodbye, Splash.
Yep.
Bye.
All right. Let's wrap it.
Oh, you melt my heart. Okay, cool.
All right, I'm stopping recording.